Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Transformers Rise of the Beast. This movie is directed by Stephen Caple Jr. It stars Anthony Ramos, Dominique, Fishback. Of course, Peter Cullen returns as the voice of Optimus Prime, along with Ron Perlman, who voices Optimus Primal in this movie as one of the Maximals. And so this is a movie that I honestly wasn't too crazy about. I wasn't really excited to watch this movie. I'm not the biggest Transformers fan in general, although I did grow up watching, Shia LaBeouf running around with a bunch of Transformers, and I used to love it as a kid, but once I got older, I started to realize how some of those older movies are not really that good at all, and so I've come to a point where I was optimistic about this movie because it is Stephen Caple Jr. and I love Creed 2, so I was thinking maybe this will be a good movie, and honestly, I thought it was a pretty fun time. And this will of course be a spoiler review, so if you have not seen the movie just yet, I would recommend to go see it, especially if you are a fan of the 80s and 90s cartoons, the Beast Wars cartoons, or just the Transformers in general as a kid, because I think you will love this movie, and I don't want to spoil and ruin some of these surprises that are in this film, because it has a couple of surprises that I honestly was not expecting in this thing. So let's get into spoilers for this movie. And the first thing I want to talk about is probably the most controversial thing about these Transformers movies, and that is the highlighting of the human characters. Because of course, if you're watching a Transformers movie, the criticism has always been to focus on the Transformers themselves and not the humans. And this movie does the exact same thing that all the other Transformers movies do, and that is hyper-focus on the human characters more so than anybody else. And in this case, I think it works really well. I think Anthony Ramos plays a great protagonist in this film. He is much better than Shia LaBeouf was, even though I did not mind, his Sam Witwicky character in those original films. I thought he was a fine presence. I just didn't like his family life and the way that he was kind of introduced and thrown into this entire situation, and every time they were kind of focusing on his home life, I just always felt like it was a waste of time. Versus this movie, I really found Anthony Ramos' character very endearing. The way that they set up his story and his relationship with his brother and his mom was all very interesting. His character's name is Noah, and his younger brother is KRIS, and his younger brother has some health issues. He has to go to a doctor every single month, and his mom is trying to make the bills. She's trying to do the best she can, and Anthony Ramos' character just got back from war. He was a soldier, and because he was a veteran, he's having some trouble getting a job because he was seen as not a good team player in the military, and so every time he's trying to apply for a job, he gets, called by this security, interview that he has, and they said that he was not a good team player, and that is why he didn't get the job at the beginning of this movie. And so he's really struggling, and he's going to a point where he's going to go to this buddy of his on the streets and possibly steal some cars in order to make some money. And so this is how he gets tied into the whole Transformers situation, because he is desperate for money, and especially this bond that him and his brother have that I do think was very endearing. You're rooting for him. So when he steals the Porsche at the beginning of this movie and it turns out to be Mirage, it's a very fun sequence where you're seeing him stuck inside of this car. You see it in that first trailer of him driving around, and he has no control over it at all, and Mirage kind of splits the car into 5 different things, and it tricks the cops and does all this really great stuff. I think this also highlights how great of a director that Stephen Caple Jr. is, because he's very capable in all the action sequences in this movie. And when I compare it to the other Transformers movies, I think it's a great comparison that some other people have made, that this movie has the spectacle that the Michael Bay movies had, with a little more grounded camera work, nothing as shaky or as overly cluttered as a Michael Bay film, but also has some of the more endearing character moments that the Bumblebee movie had. And this movie kind of sits in a nice little middle ground where it's not great at either of them, but it's pretty good on its own. And of course, this character is going to be interacting with the Transformers characters quite a bit throughout this entire movie, and so his relationship with Mirage in this film was awesome. I thought they were the best parts of this entire movie, because I just bought their friendship and their dynamic right off at the beginning, because of course, he's the one vouching for this human character, where Optimus Prime does not want anything to do with humans. He knows that Bumblebee had some sort of bond with one human. He thinks that's, yes, you had one relationship with this one human, but that's not every single human. Humans are not going to, put their lives on the line to save these, these robot alien things that is so out of this world and so bizarre to try to introduce yourself into this world. And Anthony Ramos' character is pretty willing to join it, because Mirage says that, oh, I'll let you sell me to get some money, and then I'll just, drive away and, not have to deal with that whole situation. But he's trying to help him out, and he wants to make friends with this character. And I think that this relationship and this dynamic is really solid. And more importantly, Pete Davidson brings a lot of character to this Transformers. And I think one of the biggest flaws that I had with the earlier Transformers Michael Bay films is that all these side Transformer characters that were kind of in the background that didn't have a large focus besides, Optimus Prime or Bumblebee, they didn't really have too much of a personality to differentiate them. They were all kind of the same. They all kind of blended together. And the only times they had a big personality that was, recognizable, it was just, to put it lightly, is a very very bad caricature that seemed, you know, maybe just a little bit racist. I also did enjoy Optimus Prime's arc in this film as well. And, you know, in the Michael Bay films, I can't really think of the Transformers themselves having a character arc, but in this film, Optimus goes from, you know, not trusting humans to learning how to trust humans. And so it's not a grand arc. It's not something that's like amazing on the page, but it's at least there and it's present. And again, it brings some sort of investment that you can have with Anthony Ramos's Noah and Optimus Prime. There's some sort of conflict with these two characters, and you want them to team up by the end and have that satisfying moment where they're kind of protecting each other and fighting off against the big bad and against all the threats in the end of this film. And so it is satisfying enough to see him go from the beginning of the movie to the end. And I also did really like RC. RC didn't have a lot to do in this film, but she was always dynamic in the action sequences, and I love how she was quick to move around and you know, riding in the van and going back and forth inside of it. She had a lot of great action beats throughout this entire film, and I thought her presence was really good as well. And in terms of the actual beasts in this film, all the Maximals featured in this film, honestly, I don't think this movie should be called Transformers Rise of the Beast, or maybe Rise of the Beast is a fitting title, because, you know, every single time, you know, I work at a movie theater and we have this giant Transformers standee, and everybody said, oh, it's the Beast Wars movies. The Beast Wars movie is coming out because it features all of the Maximals on equal size compared to the other Transformers character, all the Autobots on the poster, and that is very much not the case in this movie. It's definitely the Rise of the Beast, meaning that it's their introduction into the Transformers universe. And so they are honestly not in this movie much at all. You don't really get to meet Optimus Primal until about halfway through the movie, and even still, they don't really have too much to do besides, you know, being in the end of the movie. They kind of team up with the Autobots, they have some exposition to explain what's going on, and they fight in the end battle, and that's pretty much it. And so I think if you're one of those fans, those diehard Transformers fans that are saying, oh, I can't wait for the Beast Wars movie, I don't think this is the movie you're looking for necessarily. I think there's a lot of great Transformers moments that you're going to be, you know, standing up in your seat and screaming and cheering at the screen, especially in the third act of this film, but it's not a Beast Wars movie, and I've heard some criticism about that as well from some other critics, and as somebody who's not a massive diehard Transformers fan in terms of the cartoons, in terms of the Beast Wars cartoon, I wasn't affected by that, but I can see somebody really being annoyed that these characters are not featured as much as you want them to. And there's just a couple more characters I do want to mention here, and one, of course, is going to be Bumblebee, who I absolutely love his standalone film. And when it comes to this movie versus that one, I feel like this is very much Transformers 7 versus Bumblebee was, it kind of stood out on its own, being more of a coming-of-age comedy versus anything else. I felt like it transcended the Transformers films to become something even greater, and I do think that this movie does not transcend the Transformers genre. It feels very much like it is yet another film in this franchise versus being something truly special like Bumblebee was, but either way, it was fun to see him in this film, and he actually dies at the end of the first act, which I thought was a really shocking moment, and he was gone for the entire second act, which I think was a smart idea to keep him out of the film. If you're going to fake a death, or if you're going to kill a character just to bring them back later, at least leave them dead for longer than 5 minutes, unlike Rise of Skywalker and Chewbacca. But the reasoning of him coming back to life with just the energy, you know, going over him laying down on a rock, like, sure, whatever. He's back, and he had a great entrance back into the final battle, and of course seeing Noah riding on the back of him in the Transformers suit that he gets at the end of this film was also really fun to see. And the last character I want to mention is Dominique Fishback as ELENA in this movie, and I thought her role was also very much needed in this film. I think that's one thing that I can say about this film, is that there's absolutely nothing in this film that felt unnecessary or a waste of time, because again, those earlier Transformers movies, when you're focusing on these human characters, a lot of it felt like you can easily just cut it out and just not have it whatsoever. But I feel like her archaeology type thing, where she's kind of investigating what this is, and she gets dragged into this situation, and she wants to save the world, she wants to go off and explore these things in Peru, it felt more in line for her character than, you know, with Noah's character going from wanting to make some money for his little brother to all of a sudden he wants to save the world. I feel like that's, you know, tie-in with his motivations to join the Transformers in this movie was a little less strong than Dominique Fishback's, you know, want to explore these things, because she is an archaeologist. She's already interested in looking at this artifact, and of course she's going to be on board with this thing because she wants to be a part of something greater. And so that made a little bit more sense with her character than it did for Noah's character. And then of course we get to the third act final battle in this film, which is just all the Transformers, you know, goodness that you can get as a fan of the cartoon. It does feel like a cartoon at times. Honestly, I feel like this would make a great video game. game. I wish I was playing this, you know, actively having a role in this movie, you know, when you have Noah inside of the suit fighting off all these Transformers. I thought it was really good. You know, I was a little iffy on the fact that he was going to get a suit in this movie just based on the trailers, but I think it was very much earned because you get a great moment where Mirage is protecting him at the very end of the movie, and Mirage also does fake die. He comes back by the end of the film, but of course, you know, he protects him. He's leaning over him as he's being shot by the villain, and he dies pretty much, and he kind of falls apart and becomes a suit for Noah's character, and I thought it worked really well. I thought it was a really fun action sequences. Of course, you know, the beasts in this movie were really fun in the action sequences. You know, Optimus Prime was great to see. Bumblebee's return at the end fights was also really good, and it did remind me a lot of the, you know, Avengers Endgame type thing where they all get together and they say Autobots roll out. It's just a little fun thing where it feels like a live action cartoon. I think that's exactly what they were going for the third act finale of this movie, and the whole thing with Unicron being the villain by the ending of this film was really fun to see as well. I know Transformers fan will have a lot more of a reaction to seeing that in terms of the live action adaptation that he has, and of course they allude to his return later on in this franchise if this movie is successful and they do make more movies. I'd like to see what they can do with the Unicron character because I don't know much about this character. I think he was used in the Last Night, and they're kind of retconning the Last Night, by the way, because they mentioned Marky Mark earlier in this film. At least Mirage mentions that he's becoming an actor now, and thinking that it was a weird choice for him to go from Marky Mark to now acting in film, and so I love that joke. I was really laughing at that. But yeah, they're pretty much retconning everything at this point. None of the other Transformers movies really do matter anymore, which honestly, good riddance. Now the continuity just feels like it's Bumblebee and now this movie and whatever they do on in the future, because they do tease something very interesting at the very end of this film, which is, you know, Noah's character goes off to another job interview at the last few minutes of this movie, and he goes into this interview with the guy that's in Man of Steel, that like military guy. I think it was that military guy from Man of Steel, but he gets in an interview with him and he says that he's actually part of this, you know, government organization. He knows that he saved the world and he gave him free healthcare, which I have a bone to pick about that, which is, you know, if in order to get free healthcare in the United States you need to save the world, just give people free healthcare. Like, come on, guys. Like, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But in general, he gets offered this job where he can get his brother's, you know, all his bills paid. He doesn't have to worry about getting the doctor anymore. And he gives him a card to join this team of his. And on the card, it says G.I. Joe. And so Hasbro is very much doing a shared universe of, you know, tying all these things together, and it seems like Anthony Ramos is going to be the one leading the G.I. Joe movie in the future, which I absolutely love that idea. I had a G.I. Joe action figure when I was a kid. I didn't really know what G.I. Joe was. I just had one of them, and I really still don't know anything about them. I never watched the Dwayne Johnson movies at all. I know absolutely nothing about G.I. Joe, but the idea of tying in all these Hasbro properties has been floating around ever since I watched like some movie shows when I was in high school or in middle school, and so I do think that it's a great idea to bring in all these Hasbro franchises, because another Hasbro franchise is, of course, Power Rangers, which I was a giant fan of Power Rangers when I was a kid. You know, I watched the show all the time, and my brother was the biggest fan ever, and we had a whole bunch of action figures, and so I'm excited for the potential of Hasbro making a shared universe of all these things. You bring in Transformers, you bring in Power Rangers, you bring in G.I. Joe, and of course, My Little Pony and Peppa Pig, which are also Hasbro properties, which just imagine an Avengers Endgame type of movie, right? Where you have, you know, Optimus Prime, and you have a G.I. Joe character, and you have the Red Power Ranger, and they're all riding to battle on My Little Ponies, and you have Peppa Pig in the background somewhere as kind of like the Howard the Duck cameo in the portal sequence. I don't know. Just have fun with it if you're going to tie in all these Hasbro properties. Also, Monopoly is apparently Hasbro, so maybe we'll actually get that Monopoly movie. So I don't know. The opportunities and the potential of this is interesting. I just hope this movie makes enough money. I don't know what this was budgeted at, because like I said, the visual effects were really good. So if this was a really expensive movie, I'm not sure if it's going to make its budget back, which is my only hesitation to seeing this future come to fruition. But, you know, maybe it will. But that's going to be my review for Transformers Rise of the Beast. What do you guys think of it? Especially if you are a fan of the Transformers old cartoons and the Beast Wars cartoon. Were you a little disappointed in the lack of the beasts in this movie with the whole Beast Wars connection? Were you excited to see all the Transformers references still? Did you like the direction that this movie is going? Do you like the possibility of having a Hasbro shared universe, which I also do actually really like that idea. So what did you guys think about this film? I think overall it's a perfectly fine movie. I didn't absolutely love it, but I did really enjoy how fun it was. So what did you guys think about it? Comment down below. And of course, if you enjoyed this review, subscribe to the channel as well. Leave a like and do all those things. Just check out the other reviews that I'll have on this channel, including, you know, The Flash and Elemental, which come out next week, which I'm very excited to see both of those films. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.